I just wanted to take a couple of minutes now, even as we spend some time together. I couldn't help but be a bit reflective earlier today. Shireen and I took kind of our lunch break today to get outside and to start cleaning up the yard for spring as we looked outside and all the snow was gone and it was raining and we had to rake out all the leaves and things we weren't able to get before the snow flew. And as we were doing that, you couldn't help but notice that the lilies were starting to shoot through the ground, and so was the rhubarb. On top of that, the bushes, the red currant bushes, the gooseberry bushes were starting to bud and get ready for spring as well. And even as I was reflecting and marveling at all of that, the robins began to fly around overhead and land in the trees, and they were just chatting back and forth like crazy as spring approaches. And it was a wonderful time and celebrating the coming of spring, and it really made me think about a particular passage of Scripture that I wanted to share, and it's one that's so familiar for us. It's out of Ecclesiastes chapter 3. There is an appointed time for everything, and there's a time for every event under heaven. It's something for us to keep in mind, even with what's going on all around us. And he goes on to say there's a time to give birth and a time to die, to plant and to uproot what is planted, to kill and time to heal, a time to tear down, a time to build up, to weep or to laugh, to mourn or to dance, to throw stones or gather stones. One I couldn't help but think about now. There's a time to embrace and a time to shun. Embracing is also included in this passage. It goes on to say there's a time to search and a time to give up what is lost, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear apart and a time to sew together, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, and a time for war and a time for peace. And he goes on to ask the question, what profit is there to the worker from that in which he toils? I have seen the task which God has given the sons of men with which to occupy themselves, and he has made everything appropriate in its time. I mean, it's something for us to take comfort in. He's also set eternity in their heart, and yet so that man will not find out the work which God has done from the beginning, even to the end. I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and to do good in one's lifetime. Moreover, that every man who eats and drinks sees good in his labor. It is the gift of God when we get that. I know that everything God does will remain forever. There is nothing to add to it, and there's nothing to take away from it, for God has so worked that men should fear him. In other words, he's done that we would have an appropriate respect for him. That which is has been already, and that which will be has already been. For God seeks what has passed by. And in that passage, obviously, it's just this flow back and forth. That, man, you know what? For everything that we experience in this life, there's a time for that. And God's got a plan in the midst of all of that. He puts all of this together because it's part of this grand design, this grand plan that only he could fully comprehend. But somehow in the midst of that, there's this, what is the benefit to man of his labor? In the midst of that, you know what it is? To do good while we can. To remain faithful, to act as we have been called to act. You know, he has shown you, oh man, what is good and what the Lord requires of thee, but to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with thy God. It's that passage put in the context of changing circumstances. I pray for each and every one of you to be encouraged, to know, yes, God is in control. There is a season, but there is no season that is outside of God's control and God's plan. He's brought these things to pass in the history, and he is bringing them to pass now and again in the future. And why? That we might come to know that he is in control, that he is God. To take comfort in that. And be reminded that our place in the midst of all of that is to act in accordance to what we have been called, to do what is good, to love God, to love one another, to act justly, love mercy, and to walk humbly with him. I pray that as we walk humbly together again in the near future, as we walk through these times, that we would do so in a way that honors and glorifies him and continues to knit us together as the body. May you be blessed today. Keep safe. I love you guys. We'll be in touch.